Hey guys, welcome to Game Dev Discussion. This is the official podcast of the Dynasty Empire. We're on episode 33 and we have Kim Aava, lead 3D artist at DICE. How are we doing, Kim?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. There's one thing I think there's like an elephant in the room we probably need to talk about. If anyone's been near social media for the past couple of days, Twitter, Facebook, ArtStation, they've heard news. Quixel, Unreal, they're now a thing. I wanted to start talking about that because I'd love to get your perspective on it. You know, being a lead at DICE, really experienced artist. Firstly, I guess, is positive, negative. I guess, like, what's the perspective on it? What do we think about it?
Well, I mean, I saw the news and I think it spread like a wildfire almost in the office. Everyone's like, "Have you seen this?" So I mean, I think quite a lot of people are like surprised.
Mm-hmm. Do you think maybe? Do you think? I don't know. I'm trying to still work it out myself. I've had a lot of conversations with people about it. Still trying to work out what I actually think.
Being bought up by someone, like algorithm being bought by Adobe and so on.
Sorry, I think you skipped there. Sorry, what did you say, Kim?
Oh, it skipped?
Yeah, it skipped. Sorry, it's with my end. You're good. Could you repeat what you said?
So, from which part? The entire thing?
Entire thing, yeah.
Okay. What did I even say?
Spreading like wildfire in the office.
Right. Well, we were all very surprised by it. When I read the news, it kind of spread like a wildfire through the entire office at DICE. And I think everyone was just very surprised by seeing the news in general about it. I'm sorry, I kind of lost my trail of thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my end. It's because I had Google open and Google tanks my machine, so I made the frame skip.
Right.
Well, I mean, okay. Well, what would be your perspective? Let's talk about let's start with the ground level. You know, new artists get into the industry. They see this news. As a lead, I suppose it's going to affect you more than anyone, I guess, being a lead. You know, you're going to get a ton more portfolios which are full of these great assets. And I saw it as like a double-edged sword because I was like, you know, you're either going to get some great focus on lighting and composition and all this sort of stuff, but you're also going to get a lot of people who are just throwing a load of Quixel assets into Unreal, putting some volumetric fog on and some lighting. So I guess it makes your job as a lead, you know, obviously recruiting and hiring new artists, especially at that lower level, quite a lot more difficult.
Well, I would say that even when algorithm and like Substance Painter came along and Designer already made like the portfolio, like took the portfolios into a new era almost. Like you could see that there was a lot of portfolios popping up with these like 100% Substance Designer, or just like you made something and you slapped on this like procedural generated textures and you didn't really spend any time on it. You just add it there and then looked like wood, right? Okay, I'm done. So for me, like Quixel, it's kind of the same thing, but as you said, like there's probably going to be more because it's easier to use them in Unreal, obviously because of Epic. There might be some more environment, and in particular, I guess, like a lot of foliage environment and stuff. But I mean, is it really such a bad idea? We already have so many different roles in studios anyway, like people who are level artists placing things rather than actually creating. And like looking at composition and stuff, if you can throw something together in Unreal using like photoscan materials and you can make it really good, that's already showing a lot of qualities for how you can be a level artist, right?
Yeah, of course. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's one thing I think is going to be interesting is it's going to probably reframe people a little bit, like allow people to just be lighting artists or be these composition artists who make, you know, these great images. I suppose you actually hit it on the head. I suppose with the substance painter, I guess you have to adjust your artistic eye to watch out for just slapping was it oily machinery, smart material onto something. Like you could spot that a mile off. So I guess it's the same thing for this.
I would say so. I mean, that's something like compared to when I started, and it's not that long time ago since I started in the industry either, but like I didn't have any of these procedure generator or fancy tools. I was texturing in Photoshop, and then you're more careful where you would add like dirt and scratch and stuff, mostly because it's really, it takes a lot of time if you're going to do that and then add it in the roughness and in a metal map and all of that by hand and changing in the maps. So you would be more careful because it would take time. And I mean, being a lazy artist, that's not really what you want to spend time on. While now, if you can slap a material that just generate and also cover up the seams, then it's easier to just call it done, right? Without like really thinking about why or how a material definition work.
So that's on like a prop level we're talking with that. So you think Quixel, you're going to have to adjust it's the exact same, it's going to have to adjust the artistic eye for a whole level where it's like, okay, yeah, you've just dropped a lot of foliage in there, but have you thought about it? Have you, placed it in such a way which makes sense? Does it compositionally make sense? How does it affect light in? You think it's going to be a case of adjusting our artistic eye and like analysing scenes with that in mind?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we're just speculating here, but like,
yeah, of course, seeing
the transition and just the trend with props and like that's like on the individual level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you have all the assets prepared, you can just place them around. It would be more looking at how you actually lead the eye rather than the individual details.
Yeah. Well, also, let's be fair, Victor Oldham with his Dust remake with nothing but photo scans, if it means I see more stuff like that. I mean, that's seen, although like I've had this conversation before about, how I feel about photo scans as a medium, it's still a pretty cool thing for artists to be able to do. And you are right, I suppose, in a sense that there are more level art roles these days where, you are placing assets and building these big worlds up. If it allows people to stretch their legs and do that more, I suppose that's a positive. I don't know why I say I suppose. It is a positive.
Yeah, I mean, like creating, I would say like sometimes you can divide it up. Like if you're doing 3D, like props or like modular pieces and stuff, you're kind of making the Lego pieces, while a level artist would be the one like building with the Lego pieces. And it's not for everyone to build 3D models or making modular system and stuff. Like some people are really, really good at composition and you're seeing that and leading the eye. And also there are people who can, build really cool 3D, but might not have like that final touch of composition and adding things together. So it definitely opened up more possibilities for more, I guess, variety and diversity when it comes to like people applying for a job.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't really need to be able to create the 3D for it if you have a really good eye and also know how to work with a level.
Yeah, I think you'll see a lot of people having to like stretch their legs with like how much they understand engine lighting and all this sort of stuff. You can't just slap a directional light, a scar light, and some volumetric fog and call it done. I think with these types of scenes, you have to see a real fidelity to lighting. I think if you're just going to go with pre-made assets, you really have to show a good amount of composition skill and lighting skill to sort of show where your value is.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to talk about with you, I know when I originally spoke to you to try and get you on the podcast, you're in the middle of Valkyrie Jam. Firstly, actually, I suppose, could you just explain to everyone what that is?
Right. So Valkyrie Jam is a women-only game jam taking place in northern Sweden for like 10 days. So there's like professional, like people working in the industry that are invited to participate. And it would be like going to a jam, like you're making a small game together, but not like in those 24-hour or 48-hour time span, but rather like those days, because you can, at the same time, you're supposed to get to know each other, but also work with something that you might not be as familiar with, like try something new. And the reason why doing this is because there's not that many women in the industry, and this is like a great opportunity to get together and get to know other in the industry, and also just share experience and so on. So like that's something we held now twice during the summer. So we are already prepping for the next one for 2020 in the summer as well.
Sounds good. Okay, so this is something I've been wanting to unpack as a topic for a long time. So, and this is for everyone listening. This isn't like some what's the word, like argumentative debate. It's just a conversation talking about, as me, an ignorant male. You are a successful artist first and foremost, not a successful female artist. You're just a successful artist. In your experience, like, you know, you hear about in, like, you know, on social medias and all this sort of stuff, like women have a really hard time progressing and being in the games industry in general. Now, as someone with a ton of experience, a killer portfolio, and like a lead artist, yeah, could you shed some light on it, some perspective on it from your point of view, from your experience? Because, you know, I can't speak on this one, like I am completely ignorant to it. So I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
You mean in general why, like, there are few women in the industry, or just like
your experience in the industry,
is?
Just how you found it. Like, have you found, you know, just when you hear stories of like, oh, I felt like I was treated differently because I was a woman, or I've had harder time doing X, Y, Z. Is it true? Did you feel like it's true sometimes, or like, you know, just shed some light on it?
Right. Well, there's definitely like horror stories that's going around, and people who have experienced these type of things. And I think it depends also where you live, which culture in general you're like, because it would differ vastly. I mean, I lived in the Netherlands as well, and that's very different from Swedish culture. But in my experience so far, I haven't really been to a workplace where I've been treated differently as a woman. I think in the beginning of my career as a junior, I was afraid that I would be treated differently, or if I would be offered a position somewhere, it would be because I'm a woman and they want to make the numbers. But I think that's also because of like insecurity, and also because like most of my classmates were male. And then you're like, I could hear like there were a few of them that would say that, well, you will get hired because you're a woman and you will have it easy. And you're like, okay. Like, you don't really know how you're supposed to respond to that, especially like in the beginning of your career when you don't really have, you have no experience whatsoever. So I think in general, like during my time in the industry, I have had it quite good. I haven't had any occasion so far where I would feel like, oh, I was hired or I got it like this or that because I'm a woman. But I hear people a lot of the time who do experience that, and that's very sad. And it doesn't just go for like if you're, you know, a woman. It would be anyone who is like, I would say, different from the norm. Like being transgender, or like even like another skin color, or even age. Sometimes I hear like age discrimination quite a lot as well, especially when you're looking about getting to that senior position.
It made sense right now in my life.
So I mean, it's like, I think in general the tech industry is very young, and then you have game industry that is even younger than the tech industry, and it started with a lot of people in their basement, as we heard the stories. And I think it's just in general quite, it's a new thing, but also it's quite new that women are interested in tech. And it's not like, well, I would say it's quite hard to speak for anyone else in this matter, since I know so many people who like have it different than I have. But I would also say that a lot of the things that I haven't experienced any of these things is because I'm also living in Sweden, and we already have a quite good general view on gender diversity otherwise as well. So that's reflected upon the games industry here. If you would compare to anywhere else in the world where it might not be good in the society at all.
I just want to go back to that bit you said about like classmates and like that. I have heard that side of stuff where people are like, you know, oh, you're gonna have an easy time getting a job because you're a woman, because people want to hire women and not guys. And I'm like, as someone who has been responsible for hiring, as someone who spends most of my free time looking at artists and art and what artists or what studios, I'd never buy it. I'm always like, the art always speaks for itself. Like, that takes precedence over everything. Like, even if a company was intentionally in their mind's eye trying to hire for diversity, which next to no company does anyway, but the art speaks for itself at the end of the day. Like, if you go, oh yeah, you got a job because you're a woman and I'm a guy, I'd say, well, that's probably a bad like framing analysis. You should be looking at your portfolio first. Like, I doubt someone gets hired just because of their gender. You know, a company can't afford that. AAA is too hard a industry to get into, and it's too selective to be picking a lesser artist based on the gender or skin color or whatever it might be. And that's how I've always seen it. And when I hear, and I have heard guys say in the past, go, oh yeah, you're gonna get that job because you're a woman, I'm like, maybe look at yourself first before you make that judgment. And that is one frustration I have seen.
Yeah, I've heard of it as well, and I mean, it's always easy to blame other things, and I think a lot of those arguments comes from maybe, you know, poor self-esteem, or maybe, you know, not believing enough in yourself or working hard enough, I guess, or like as you said, looking at your own portfolio, or even, you know, reflecting upon your own weaknesses, I guess, or like what you need to work on. It's easier always to blame someone else, or like scuff it off, like in that, oh, well, this is because you're, well, X or Y. But yeah, I've also been in hiring, and one thing that I never look at the name or like photos or anything. For me, I only see the art, and then I make a judgment based on that, rather than like who the person is behind, because that shouldn't matter. And that's also why I hear a lot of people giving tips to students as well, with like, in your CV and your portfolio, don't add your picture or anything like that, anything that could be, you know, used in like a bias, I guess, way, which I think is a really good thing to keep in mind, because not everyone who's looking at your portfolio will, you know, view it that way, and just stay unbiased and stuff. So
I mean, do you not think though, like, yeah, they could do that, but if you don't give them a reason to think like that, if you know what I mean, like, you know, if you make sure you got a good portfolio, and I know that's easier said than done, I completely understand that, but this is a pretty difficult industry to get into. Leave no room for them to be biased. You know, if you have an amazing portfolio and it is 30% better than everyone else, there's no, you know, bias can't come into that. There's no room for it at that point. Maybe on a fringe case where it's like, you know, there's nothing between the two candidates, I could see that advice ringing true in some cases.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be, you can never know though who is going to be the hiring person, or what they are thinking, or what kind of personal background they have for like their arguments or the decision they are making. Like, even if you look at someone, like, doesn't matter, like even art or just in everyday life, you always have opinion about things, yeah. And even if it's unconscious, you will make a call based on your own knowledge, like to this day. So I think it's a good advice, but as you said, it shouldn't be, like, in the end, it shouldn't be needed, because the portfolio should speak for itself. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. So that's why people tend to give that advice.
Yeah, I completely agree. One thing, let's talk about one thing. We're talking about, like, there's not many women in games. So I'm going to go off the research I read up by Swedish. I believe it's Swedish. I don't quote me on that. I'll have to find it out. But basically, they're looking at is women in tech, not women in games specifically, but we'll class games as tech. And basically, they were kind of the conclusion was, there is less women in tech because there's less interest in it. If you only have, say for example, you only hire the top 1% of artists to get to games. If you have a pool of 1,000 men and 100 women, for every 10 men you get 1 woman. You naturally get an imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I suppose, and this is a super tough question, and it's not really one which I expect an answer to. I just think it's worth talking about. One, does that need correcting? Do we need to take affirmative actions to try and correct that? Or is it more of a case of just make sure the options are available to everybody? Because part of me is like, when you're like, I hear of, Netflix got a lot of heat for it, where they're like, there's actual quotas where they're like, we want X amount of these people, X amount of these people, and X amount of these people at every level of our business because we want to be, quote, diverse. That sort of equity type approach, I personally don't agree with. It's all about opportunity. Now, I'm just curious, like, what with games, is it a case of we quote need to get more women into games, or is it a case of let's make sure women are understanding that there is an opportunity in a career here, and it isn't just for guys who like to be playing games in a basement. You know what I mean? Like that stereotype that comes with game dev. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, it's a hard question. Like, I don't like when people are saying we need to have this amount of % of anything, because I believe there's more to diversity than just gender, age, and like skin colors and stuff. Like, diversity can be in just your experience and how like you grew up, and anything that's making you different from like a group of people. But yeah, I would say that it's quite hard to correct something like that, and we shouldn't necessarily just like up the numbers just because. It's rather like spreading knowledge, as you mentioned, like making people aware that there's a career path you can take, in case you didn't know about it. And in order to make that happen, you would need to go to like school and teenagers, and like just talking about there's like a career opportunity here, rather than like when you're older. But even then, like, you can easily change your career if you really would like to as well. So it's more about giving people like information, I would say, and then so they have a choice. Because if they have the information and they're really interested, then they know how to approach that and what to do. But if they have the information and still not interested, then I mean, why force it? Then there is no interest, right? But I think in general right now, there's a lot of people who are unaware. I mean, even like among not just talking about women, but just men, or like in other countries that we don't really have that much game dev going on at all. There's like a lack of like, how would you go about to actually make a game, or like that you can actually have it as a work. And the indie scene kind of helped that, because it allowed people to go and make their own games, or find a group of friends and make games, and you spread that on Steam or any other platform. So I think there are certain things that are making it like we're spreading it by like little by little through like different medias. Just the question is how long time it would take for it to like be spread enough, so everyone has an awareness. But yeah, I completely agree with not forcing anything and just hiring because of the sake of it.
Because every time
I rather like spreading info.
Yeah, because the Swedish study basically like it came to the conclusion of the more egalitarian it is, like a society, like Sweden is. Sweden's very, open opportunities for everybody, which is great. It actually had an opposite effect to what they thought it would. They thought it'd bring more, genders into the other categories, so bring more women into tech, all that kind of stuff. It actually had the opposite effect. Now, it's interesting what you said about, it's more of an information thing being available. I think it might come down to as well, this type of information and these career choices being made early in in school. Because for example, in school, when I'm in secondary school and I have to pick my subjects, I have traditional art as an option. I have like food tech, graphic design, and media. And like in media, you study film and TV and radio. In graphic design, you study 2D graphic design. Do you think if 3D, not necessarily games, but 3D in general was brought in as a sort of state school level, showing kids at an early age, hey, this is a career option, just like sciences, just like maths is, this is also a valid career option. Do you think that could potentially help as well?
Well, I think so. Like talking to kids, like actually from my own experience as well, like very early days, when I was like a student myself, I was studying game design at a university. I was also taking like extra freelance work as a language teacher. And there was this kid, I think he was like 13 years or something, even younger even. And he was like talking a lot about games. He thought it was really cool that I was working in the industry, or like going to be like, oh, you're going to make all of these games. And I was like, yeah, hopefully, I guess, when I was a stressed out student. Actually, I met him again at that school that I was going to, but like, I think it was 6 years later or something. And he came up to me being like, I don't think you recognize me, but you were my teacher when I was this like age, and you really inspired me to pursue a career in gaming, and I didn't know you could. And he just wanted to thank me for it. And, I was really touched by it. And that is like one person's life that, like, just me being there and in the right time, I guess, and going to school, pursuing my own career at that point. Mm-hmm. But just he seeing that you could made him want to take that up himself a couple of years later and go to the same school. And I think that's like, for me now, that was one of the best moments I had in my career, knowing that I could have that impact on someone. And that goes to say, like, what you're asking about going to school, like, he was very young back then and he saw this as an opportunity. So, and he pursued it. So obviously we need to be there and be more visible, like for kids, and just show that this is something you could do as a career in the future, because it will impact kids. Usually when you are in that age, you're like very open to a lot of things, which like that's a completely other subject, but that's where we should be and spread the knowledge, so they are aware when they are like choosing something to go for as a career.
Yeah, so rather than it being like an affirmative action type thing where it's like, let's get more women into games, it's like, let's just educate people that this is a career choice of all people. And I like what you said about the other countries as well. It's an easy thing to overlook, especially me, because I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it. There's other countries which don't have the same sort of visibility and infrastructure to like promote games as a career. I'm not actually sure. That's like a much more difficult subject to tackle, so I wouldn't try and put that on you now. But yeah, there's one other thing we want to talk about. You brought it up off air, and since you're talking about students, I think it's a really good segue into it. And it's about, like, you mentioned about mental health within students trying to get into the industry. I think it's a good subject to move on to.
Yeah, sure. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, seeing as I'm talking a lot to students. Like I'm teaching sometimes as well at nearby schools, like quite close to DICE actually, at Future Games.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple of courses there in environment art, but then I also teach people online sometimes, like hanging out in Discord or just, on my stream and so on. And something that a lot of students bring up is like, is it going to be this stressful when I'm in the industry? Or like, oh no, I really need to sit up the entire night? Or just talking about like when you're teaching in a school as well, and then just knowing that some of them are staying up so late, so many days, and then just plowing through things. And people are burning out before they're even in the industry. For me, that's really, alarming, because we are setting so high bars for people to get into the industry. I think you mentioned this before as well. It's quite hard as it is to get in, and you need to have a really killer portfolio. And seeing as there's so many new like tech tools, improvements, and so on, it's quite easy, as we already said, to like drag and drop a material in a 3D model and then boom, you textured it. Which means that the level of portfolio compared to a few years ago have like risen a lot. Like it's a high competition environment, which means that people are pursuing a career being a student or like self-taught. They really need to put in a lot of effort, but also time. And it seems like we're stressing them out, like even before they started, and then keeping that high level, and stress. And I know that there's a lot of companies that still have crunch cultures. Like we are not really doing anyone a favor of having that high bar, but also if we want to have new people in the industry, we shouldn't burn them out before they even enter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And it's something I've thought about, and I basically landed that I have no idea how you go about combating this type of issue, because like you said, it's a high bar to get in. It's it's such a sought after job, and it's such there's so few opportunities. Like what do we do? Do we, is there something the industry should maybe think about, how they hire, how they advertise the industry? Because as these tech tools become better and better, you're going to need less and less artists. Already with like materials, you don't need anywhere near as many material artists as you probably did 10 years ago, because the tools have gone so much better. So you're going to need a couple of killer artists to do the job of what, say, 10-15 artists could do 10 years ago. So I mean, is it just the nature of the beast, do you think, or are we missing something, do you think?
I think it's really hard. I haven't really found an answer myself. I only see like I can see it happen, but I don't really know what to do about it, because I think, the whole industry is kind of responsible, not just like on an individual level or like a company, but like it's just hard when you see it's progressing so fast. But also, like, I think just a few years ago there were talk about, oh, we're not going to have as many artists anymore because outsourcing, and you can outsource everything. And then you're like, well, those outsourcing companies are also going to need artists. And
yep.
That's what happened now. A lot of outsourcing companies have like hundreds and hundreds of artists working there. So it's not like the thing people are afraid of, that you're not going to have a job, is moving. Instead of being in the company, it moved out to like being more of an art focused company, I guess. The same with like photo scanning materials. I guess someone is going to have to photo scan them, but then also like some people is going to have to build everything with all the photo scanning. So it's going to create new job opportunities because of that. But yeah, the bar is rising all the time because of all this. You need to know more tech as well as a student, but also know. It's kind of going back also to the Quixel popping up now.
Yeah, I was about to say it is.
Like, you as a student sit there going like, okay, so substance is the thing. I'm gonna go and learn this, and then all of a sudden, oh, here you go. We're gonna do this now. Or people changing to Blender, and you're like sitting there. I mean, it's already a bit tricky sometimes as someone already in the industry, knowing like, oh, which direction should I go? But as a student, that's probably stressing a lot of people out even more, because it's like, what am I supposed to do? you know?
I think maybe it's also, so there's two things I've come to with it is, and you sort of touched on it. I think having the outsourced studios be made more public, because at the moment, you know, a game gets made by a developer, and the developer's like, made by us. I'm not going to name names, but like, you're made by us, and everyone's like, right, great, I've got to apply for that studio because that's who made the game. They don't. It's almost like this like taboo thing of like who their outsourcing studios are sometimes, and they don't get the limelight. Now, I'm not. You know, there's plenty of outsourced studios. You know, you got Decagon, you got Hi-Res, Elite 3D. You got all these outsourced studios. To the people not in the know, you know, it's easy for us people within the industry because we know how it works. We know people. We've commuted, we've networked, and all that sort of stuff. To a student, all they see is big game gets made, and it's made by these guys, and I'm going to apply for these guys. And there's very little transparency on it's made, instead of it being like made by X studio, it should be it's made by X, supported by A, B, C, D, and E. And then the students go, well, okay, I've got that as an option, but I've also got these other 4 studios as options, and they actually made all the art. And suddenly there's like a bit of transparency there, because I know when I was starting out, I didn't know who the outsourcing studios were. I didn't even know they existed. I thought studios just made all the art all themselves, and you know, that was it. And it wasn't until I got in and I figured it out a little bit. So that might be part of it.
Yeah, I get what you mean. That's also something I've thought about, but you kind of said it. So it's like, I mean, it should be given more cred to everyone who's been involved. But also, when I think about it, I don't think I ever met a student when I asked, like, so where do you want to work? Like big, large company, or like smaller indie, or like what type of games do you like? Like when you ask those things, just to kind of guide them on the way of like how, like, essentially what they should do with their portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
There's never anyone who mentioned like an outsourcing studio as a like, oh, I want to go and work there because they make cool art. I never heard that actually.
Well, it only came up really. I spend a lot of time in the Dynasty Discord in voice chat, and there's a few guys who are like, they've asked a few questions sometimes, like, oh, what do you think I should do in my portfolio? I'm like, where do you want to work? And they have mentioned in the past, oh yeah, well, I'm actually really interested in, like, say, Decagon, for example. And I'm like, well, maybe focus, if that is your focus, like, your honest focus is, like, say, an outsourcing studio such as Decagon. I'm like, well, make props then. Make really high quality props. If they say to me they want to work at Ubisoft, I'd be like, grab a load of asset packs, build some really nice composition levels, focus on lighting, focus on building these stories within the scenes. That's what you focus on. But I feel as if there's like a bit where, you know, students just go, well, I've got to make all the assets and these big killer props, but I want to work at Ubisoft. I'm like, you're missing something there, because Ubisoft does have a props team, but for asset artists, there's a lot of work for outsourcing studios. And I do think it's just that lack of transparency. And it only really came up in the Discord when someone was like, I want to work at Decagon. And I'm like, oh, stop trying to make big, gigantic environments. Make some really high quality props. And that will help you. And it's like, there's very little of that narrative going on at the moment.
Yeah, I think transparency in general is something the industry is very bad at. You know, just when it comes to anything, yeah, really. So being more transparent about things like that, like what are we actually looking for, rather than like, oh, like all the job ads you read, you're like, doesn't really say anything, honestly. It's just a lot of fancy words, and you're like equally confused leaving the page after you read it, going like, yeah, I have no idea if I meet the requirement, but I guess I will apply, or not, because you feel intimidated. It can go both ways. But just talking about stuff like that, like if you really do want to sit and make really cool looking assets and just focus on that one piece, then yeah, pursuing a career in like in an outsourcing company might be a better option, because usually in a company you focus more on the bigger picture. You're actually building the game and making it work with all the disciplines. rather than focusing on that individual badass looking piece of art.
Yeah.
So, but I don't think that many are that transparent, or just like not the knowledge is there, I guess, like the information.
I just think studios aren't very transparent about it. I think studios are very much like, hey, we made this amazing thing, and you see the credits, it's like, yeah, we made this, and it's like nearly any AAA studio, it's like you definitely use an outsourcing studio somewhere down your pipeline. Like, credit them, not for like their benefit, for the public's benefit, so the public and the younger artists can see these other places. Because I know, like I said, I know what it's like. You know, as a kid, I just think, Ubisoft made all of these games. It's just Ubisoft, or you know, just EA made these, or whoever it might be. It's like, well, they didn't. At the end of the day, like they had support from either support studios or like like I said, outsourcing studios, stores, whatever it might be. I mean, look at I know a couple of artists who have quit studio work and they work for asset stores now, like GamesTextures.com. It's like, that's a perfectly reasonable career pursuit. It's just not an obvious one.
No, exactly. And I know a fair amount of people who also been working in like AAA studios, and then after a couple of years, just, they start working in one of those outsourcing companies instead, because that's kind of what they want to focus on. Maybe we should just add lists in like every Discord when someone's like, oh, I really want to work here, and then just start posting links to outsourcing companies going, hey, this is an option too.
I mean, I've got an Excel sheet full of studios and their countries and the type of studio, so I think that's not a bad idea. Just link everyone who ever asks, like, here you go, there you go, there's all your options. I'm curious to get your thoughts on something as well. It's something I thought about, just backtracking a little bit when we're talking about students getting in the industry and like burning them out and all this sort of stuff. This may be my rugby sport head on a bit too much, but I mentioned a little bit that it might be the nature of the beast, the industry. And I was thinking about it from like a sports perspective. We take like a big sports team. They are the best of the best players, with the best of the best coaches, with the best of the best management and physios and nutritionists and strength and conditioning. They're all the very best of their field, but there's not many of them. Is games a similar thing? Like, growing up, I wanted to play for England as a rugby player. Obviously, that didn't work out. There's only 15 guys who can make it onto a rugby pitch to play. Is the games industry kind of maybe in the same bracket that there's a very finite amount of jobs, but there's loads of people who want it, and unfortunately the nature of the beast is the people who really grind and make them sacrifices are the ones who make it? Or is that's not an okay way of looking at it and we should reframe our focus?
Well, I would say it's not an okay way of looking at any industry like that when it comes to people. I mean, in the end, it's like, it's humans we're talking about, just people who wanna like have a job, or like they have a dream of pursuing something. So, but yeah, it's hard though. I get what you mean with like comparing it. I wouldn't say it's that harsh, but I can get the comparison, and sometimes it can almost feel like that, because it's not that many options. And even with like all the indie studios popping up, or like more bigger companies popping up, or an indie studio becoming a AAA studio, just sheer numbers of people who want to be in the industry, I mean, that's increasing faster than the jobs we are generating. And I think that also has to do with just looking at people who've been working for 15 years or so in the industry. A lot of them didn't have an education. It started out at something and there were no schools, and then education started popping up more and more, but again, only in certain countries where there's actually like proper, I guess, industry there. So there's need for a school to pop up. But because of that, and then just so many people taking those educations, it's just a lot of people that want to have a job, and we don't really have that in the industry. So I guess in a sense it's very comparable to in sports, where there's only a few who can get that job.
Well,
It sucks though.
It does suck, but it's bad. Like I said, I probably have my sport head on, and it's not probably the most healthy way of looking at it. I'm just like, I just see the way the industry plays out, and I'm like, it's also competitive. You know, at the end of the day, there's one job ad, there's 6 people applying for it, only one person can get it, and I just think that has a snowball effect because, okay, let's go back to the students who like you teach. It's like, if they have my head on, I'm looking at everyone else who's my competition and going, right, am I good enough? No. Well, I need to work on my stuff. Am I ahead of that person? And like I said, this is me, a very competitive person. I'm like, all I'm thinking is I need to get ahead. I need to develop my art. Like, that person's like definitely would get a job over me. Right, I need to work hard. I need to work harder. Sacrifice a few nights sleep. Whatever it might be. Because at the end of the day, the end result is only one person gets a job. And I think the issue is always going to come back to there's just such a finite amount, and unless like indies are able to, do you remember the PlayStation 2 days when like there was just games all the time? There was every week there was like new games to play. I could go down Game or like GameStop or wherever it might be and pick up a new game, and there's lots of it. Whereas now it's like you've either got these big massive AAA games coming out once a year from like 4 or 5 studios, and then you have like a ton of indie. And I don't think this problem really gets resolved unless you close that gap a little bit. And I don't know whether that's indies catch up or something comes up in the middle, but that's the only way I really see it getting resolved, is because you basically need to generate more jobs essentially. I think that helps with the situation.
It helps with the situation, but also I think we kind of need to tone down a bit of like, when we're looking for people, we tend to write in job ads looking for the best of the best.
Yeah.
And, you know, glorifying everything. And it's not really healthy. And I mean, when you're meeting people, sometimes students, to go like, oh my God, you're amazing and stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's really sweet. I really take it to heart. It's like a really nice compliment. But also it's like, I'm just a person, you know, working in the industry. I see it as my job, and then that's it, kind of. And I think a lot of students also tend to put people on a pedestal a bit. And I would say it's also like people in the industry is like responsibility to tone down it a bit, or like, you know, show a bit more that it's not as glorified that maybe you're putting up the picture of.
Being a human, basically.
Yeah, which is why I'm streaming, and also love streaming when I don't know jack shit as well. And you sit there going like, I never seen, and then being like, oh, and then students come along and they teach me instead, just to see that, oh, this person is also a human, I guess. I think those are my most fun moments, and like when students can actually teach me and get to feel like, oh, we can give something to you as well, and not just like they know things more than I do. And you can still like be in the industry and not be the best of the best, as the job ad says.
Well, I think I have to admit, I love the fact that you stream. I mean, it's what originally drew me to Dynasty Empire. I love the fact that Jeremy streams, because I find watching an actual artist work, especially what you do, because you're doing really different stuff. Like you're learning designer, you're learning programming, and you're doing stuff. The real value comes in seeing you solve problems. And a great example, I'm going to reference Jeremy with this one. He's learning Blender at one point, and like seeing how an artist who is, you know, been in AAA for X amount of years, how they approach that new piece of software, you know, what problems are they trying to solve, what tools are they looking for me is the most informative exercise in terms of learning, because I'm basically looking at these artists, yourself included, and going, what problems are you trying to solve? What are you looking at? And going, I need to find this thing, I'm trying to do this technique. And as an observer, I'm thinking, well, clearly that technical tool is important because this person wants to find it in this package they're using. And I just love anyone who does streaming for art, and like the whole mentorship stuff. I'm just so for, because I think it's where the learning comes in. And like I said, you never finish as an artist, and I think that's something I said it in my art station learning course, and I know Jeremy's big on this as well, is you'll never finish as an artist. And I feel as if that's something that students probably need to be. It needs to be crystal clear, day one, because I know I got stuck in a rut for a little bit when I was younger, because I was thinking, right, I've learned how to texture, I've learned how to model, and I've learned UE4. I'm done. I'm going to go into industry now. And you know, you're a testament to this. I am. Any artist is like, we're never finished learning, whether it's because there's a new package or there's new skills to learn. And I mean, with the streaming stuff as well. I mean, actually, I want to ask something about the streaming thing. What made you want to do programming? Because you picked up programming, and you're like one of the first artists I've seen who's just like, fuck it, let's have a look at scripting. Like, why?
I think it goes back to, like, I don't really see myself as an artist. I mean, people saying that, oh, you as an artist, or my title say you're a 3D artist, but
Right.
like, when I started looking into like pursuing a career in games, I looked at coding as my first option, because that's what I thought games were made. Like, you put together some piece of strings and then you have a game. Didn't really take into consideration that there's art and sound or like anything like that. I just like, oh, it's a piece of code, right? So that's kind of where it comes from, actually, that I was trying to learn that on my own, but like math or like some of those things are very hard for me. It require a lot of time and also patience for someone to teach me, because I have so many questions why this and why that, and some things that people think is logical for me I feel is not logical. So someone needs to kind of, I guess, persuade me that this is logical in a way. But I love like doing tech art and like problem solving in general. And like for me, being a 3D artist, it's more problem solving than being an art. Like doing UE mapping for some reason is something I find relaxing, almost like doing a puzzle, because I'm problem solving, right? Like what is the most optimal way for this type of game? Do I have to stack this one in this way? Will the player see this, or blah, blah. But also when it comes to tech meshes, like loading and lighten meshes, raycast and stuff, if you're hand making them, like it's just a lot of problem solving. And I think when I was figuring out, okay, so what should I learn next for one of my streams, and I was doing some substance designer, which I thought was really fun because that's more leaning into the technical aspect. I was like, Python, that might be fun. That's part of Maya. That's part of a tool I'm using. Yeah, let's learn some Python. So yeah, I think just in general, going back to what I wanted to do in the beginning, just to touch on that again, like coding, which has been very fun because the exercises on the website I'm using is talking a lot of Cucumber and Tzatziki and very daily life things, I guess. But also the fact that so many people are so talented, like that in the chat. It's also very fun when they are then like trying to explain in text to me how this work or why it works in this way. It's also been very fun, and I really appreciate when people do that, because it gives me better learning as well. Having like a lot of people are asking like, why are not you using a tutorial or doing this and that instead? I'm like, but I like exploring, and that's the best way for me to learn. Just to sit in front of a software and go like, okay, I wonder what this button does. It did that. Okay. Oh wow, this is so weird. Why is it doing this? And then just trying to figure it out by yourself, kind of.
Yeah, I completely appreciate the whole wanting to problem solve. I know that's why I'm big on substance design now. It's like it's very therapeutic, because you have to just, compared to being in ZBrush and Painter and like modeling, it's a completely different way of thinking, solving problems, and I imagine it's the exact same with coding. Your brain's having to work in a completely different way, so it's almost refreshing. And actually, I agree. I don't think I always say whenever anyone's like, "Oh, how shall I learn designer?" I'm like, just open it. Play, plug things in, see what happens, figure out why things aren't working, and then move on to the tutorials. Because the problem is, I was having this conversation in the chat a while ago, It's like if you open up a Daniel Tiger tutorial when he's talking about like making rock, he has to make a few assumptions that you understand certain fundamentals of design. It'd be like if you were to make a modeling tutorial, which is you had to speak through like what a bevel is, what an actual bevel is, what is an extrude. If you had to do that every single time, you know, the tutorial will never progress because you're constantly explaining what all these words mean. So I agree. I think opening up Designer or any package like that and just experimenting and sort of getting to grips with what works and what doesn't before tackling the actual tutorial is a really good exercise to do. I think it really helps you learn your way of doing stuff as well, which is quite important.
Yeah, and I mean, Daniel Tiger's tutorials, they're amazing.
Yeah.
But there's also like, if I wouldn't go and open Designer by myself, as you said, there's a few assumptions he needs to make. And if you're completely new and you're starting a tutorial, okay, I'm going to go and learn this, you're going to have so much questions. Like, why is he doing that? Or why is that working like that? Or is there another way you can do this? Or is this the only way? Or like, there's so many questions, at least for me, that's popping up in my head that I can't even, you know, I can't even think anymore because there's so many questions. So I rather like sit and then just explore. And while I'm at it, if I stumble upon it, like, why is this node behaving like this? Like, why do I have to configure it in this way, like in Designer? Then I can always go into the documentation and read about all the parameters and like the logic behind the node on like their website and, you know, explore that part of it and just keep it at that. And then I know, rather than like being confused the entire way in a tutorial going like, I wonder, and then I can only recreate that particular thing again and again that person is showing in the tutorial as well, because I don't have an understanding of why I'm doing this.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, that's why I do like his tutorials where he isn't making something, he's just exploring nodes and shapes. Like, I enjoy them more than plug this node into this node and then this node into this node with this numbers and you'll end up with like rock at the end. I like the ones where he's just like, hey, you can create this type of shape by these 3 nodes and you can create this type of shape with like these 3 nodes. It's like you're giving some tools for the person to build what they need to build. However, Kim, we've been talking for an hour. I can't believe how quickly that's gone, and it's like there was so much more which I really would have wanted to cover. But I finish every podcast with the same question. I'll put you on the spot. If you could talk to yourself when you're, you know, first getting into your career, is there any advice you'll give yourself?
Relax, maybe. I was one of those students who would stay up day and night and never go and sleep for like 2 years and have no social life whatsoever. And then I would land my job and just go to my work. And then I would stand there going like, what did I do this 2 years in my life? Because eventually I think, knowing myself, I would have ended up with that portfolio anyway. But the stress and just the, I guess, anxiety going around all the time and the worrying and everything, I would go back to myself and say, just relax, take it easy, do it in your own pace, don't feel worried, you know, just to be there and be reassuring, because that's something that I was really lacking or missing from someone to tell me, yes, you know, you're going to be okay.
Hopefully someone's going to be listening to that now. Kim, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy and you've come in your own time to come on this, so I really appreciate you coming on and I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. It's been really fun.
Everyone who's listening, please remember to, you know, like, follow, subscribe to whichever platform you're listening to. It helps us spread the word of the podcast and allows, you know, young artists and students to hear some of the things that Kim has to say. But yeah, we're going to wrap up. Kim, thank you very much, and everyone listening, thanks for passing by, and we'll catch you on the next one.